Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We're so excited for this episode today because we have the one and only Mia Findlay on today. She is got to be one of the most experienced eating disorder recovery coaches, training with Carolyn Costin as well. And she has been on YouTube for many, many years. She started when she was recovering from her own eating disorder, graciously sharing everything that she was going through with everybody else, giving them support and encouragement. And that continues to be such an incredible resource today. She's also been doing the Beyond Body podcast with Holly, who's another fantastic CCI coach. She's very present on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok more recently, working a lot more in the space, talking about both eating disorders, but also advocating and speaking up against violence against women, which has been amazing to see her speak so passionately about, and it becomes such an interest of hers. She is the principal and founding coach of Beyond Body Coaching, which both Meg and I have been a part of for almost 4 years now, receiving supervision from her and training, which has honestly been so invaluable, motivational, given us so much confidence in coaches and meeting clients where they truly are. So on a professional level, we are so grateful to her for helping us to move along in our coaching as well. We're so excited to have her on. This is going to be such a great discussion. So let's get started. Welcome to the podcast, Mia.
Thank you for having me. I mean, this is just us coming together today is part of what I love about this community in this space is like we all have these long-standing relationships that keep kind of circling back around each other, whether it's through the business stuff or the advocacy stuff. Like Meg and I many years ago connected over what we were both doing on YouTube and found a bit of community that way. And just like eating disorders and recovery can be a really lonely path. I think it's beautiful that we all find each other, whether it's during the process, after the process, or then when we have the privilege of giving back. So I really am so happy to be here.
Oh, Mia, thanks so much for joining us. So, one of the things we wanted to speak to you about today was something I've learned through your social media channels, actually. And I think you only were diagnosed post your recovery, but that you have recovered alongside a chronic health condition of endometriosis. And I guess help clients with a similar kind of thing in that they're recovering alongside a chronic health condition, which I have had DMs about. I've spoken to people about a few times, but haven't had the experience of it myself. So I'd love to know from your personal experience, from your experience with clients, like how is that having recovery with a potentially, like, I guess, compounding factor of another health condition? Also in a world where the content isn't necessarily geared towards it. So how do you like personalize your own recovery and seek the right sort of treatment and the right sort of messaging that's tailored to you and your individual needs in the situation of having multiple health conditions?
Well, I think you just touched on it there so beautifully. It just reflects what we're always saying, whether or not your recovery intersects with a chronic illness or otherwise, which is, the importance of treating eating disorders individually and treating the individual versus putting everybody through cookie cutter processes and thinking we're all going to get the same outcome. Because I went through recovery and then about 2 years in, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. On average, it takes about 7 years to get diagnosed because this is such a poorly funded and researched area, as so much of women's health is, because the majority of health initiatives and medicine and treatments are tailored around men. Even some of the medication that you would take on a day-to-day basis, the effects of those and the impacts and use of those is all tailored around and researched around purely men. So it wouldn't be a surprise that something that only affects women is not really being looked into. I think we could probably say a little bit of that about eating disorders as well, right? If we think it's just women dealing with it, why would we want to know more about it? So I had recovered and then discovered this illness and was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis. And that has all kinds of impacts on my body in terms of pain, severely painful, also changes to body. So I can sometimes have a different pant size in the morning to the middle of the day to the end of the day. I can fit in 3 different, sizes of pants. And even though I didn't know it at the time, that surely would have had a bearing on my eating disorder. It surely would have had a bearing on my recovery. And it's obviously something that I still deal with now. I mean, some days I feel incredibly foreign in my body, incredibly disconnected from it. I really struggle to find gratitude for it and even a neutral feeling towards it when it feels like my enemy sometimes. It feels like it's working against me. So it's definitely given me really useful insight when I do come across that intersection with clients because I can understand the lived experience from both sides and also know we can recover even if we have this added complication, right? So I think that it is about making sure that you are certainly seeking out support and professionals who understand this. And that doesn't have to be everyone. Everyone doesn't have to come from lived experience or this knowledge. Just having a bit of it in the setup can be helpful. And even if that isn't available to you, finding communities and outlets and some advocacy online, just like we do with eating disorders, where there is some crossover or where you can find some kind of community and sense of understanding. And some of those things which are working for others, obviously, we want people to be safe, but we have to be realistic. Sometimes people can't access all the care and support they deserve. So being able to find people who have navigated this before you and take a little bit of comfort in the fact that they may have found a way to navigate this, I think, that's one of the pluses of social media. There's not, there's not a simple answer to social media. Some of it's great, some of it's not so great. But I think that it's definitely doable and possible. And I think that sometimes it can even give people a window into self-compassion and body compassion and acceptance and neutrality that otherwise might not have been prompted because you kind of have to reckon with this stuff, right? It's unavoidable. So you have to come to some kind of peace and understanding and some kind of unity with your body, even just to get through the periods where your symptoms just feel unbearable. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag there, but as usual, the best thing to do is get the right care. And where that's not possible, I think looking for that lived experience and community part can offer some relief and some hope.
And how did you, and even I guess, do you cope with things that are like triggering or what's the word, like come up against the eating disorder? So things that are related to body image then for you, like changing body size physically just throughout the day. I imagine that would be a super triggering experience, eating disorder wise, or also maybe goes against some of the messaging around like you get like body positivity as a message. That's like a prolific message out there, like feel positive in your body, love your body. I don't necessarily think that's the best kind of message anyway for anybody, but it is a huge, huge message out there. So, how do you like consume that kind of messaging or make it kind of like metabolize it within your own situation?
Yeah, and discomfort, totally. I mean, you guys know that a big part of my philosophy from my own recovery and then what I do in Beyond Body is comes from the core of body neutrality. Because exactly like you just said, I mean, this might have been part of why I started having this thought process all those years ago. I remember I was out and about and at that time when I recovered, because that was like 12, 13 years ago now when I was going through this process, I made a video about it. I came home and sat down and made a video about it where I was like, all the messaging we get in this recovery process is love your body, read poetry to your thighs, like focus on it every day and, come up with sonnets about this part of your body that you don't like. And I was like, I have thought about my body my whole life. My whole life. I have spent most of my day, even if it's buzzing in the background, thinking about my body. My alternative to that should be I should be thinking about it less, not thinking about it the same, but just for different reasons. It was the thinking about it, the focus, the hyperfixation, and the expectation as well. Like hating your body comes with expectations that you can change it and that it's going to be the answer. But that's the same kind of level of expectation with the body love and body acceptance piece. And it doesn't mean that loving your body, accepting your body isn't part of the body neutrality process. It's just not an expectation. It just can be an outcome. And it's also looking at love as a doing word, less as a feeling, right? That we show love to our body. We show love and respect to it, even when we're not aligned with it. So I came home and made that video, and that just started to make sense to me. And it's why it showed up from day one in the work that I did. And I think it was the very first workshop that I ever ran because I just felt like I knew this so intimately inside and out. And I could see the difference had made for me and it was making for clients when we applied these principles. Because it is about riding the wave of your body image. It's accepting that you are not going to have one feeling about your body image every day for the rest of your life because your body is always changing. I encourage people to look at it through the lens of like, how do you relate to other people? Do you feel the same way about them every day? Like, I bet you guys love and adore your husbands. Do you always feel the same way about them? Or are there days where you're like, you're really pissing me off? And we may not be totally aligned today, but I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to respect you. I'm still going to show up for this relationship. And I'm still going to, contribute in the ways that are healthy to make sure that we ride out this wave so that the overall arc of our relationship is safe and healthy. It's the same thing with your body, it's relating to it through that lens. So it's teaching people little things like from my own life, I just have an easy go-to stack of clothes on days when I know that it's going to be a uncomfortable day in my body. It's going to be a irritated day, inflamed day, staying away from mirrors, staying away from things which just remind me how alien I feel and how somatically dysregulated I feel. It's staying away from content which is going to make me feel icky and bad. And it's showing myself the kind of love and compassion I would for a friend if they were staying at my house and they were having one of those days. Like, what would we be watching? We'd probably go to bed early. We'd probably try to get a good night's sleep. We'd probably be hydrating. And the longer that you don't try to push against that tension, the quicker it releases, right? I think that's so much of what happens with an eating disorder. You give into that tension. And so you just elongate this awful, dysregulated feeling and distressed feeling. And what you learn in recovery is like you have to go with the discomfort and then you observe and you go, oh, and it's gone. Okay. All right. Tomorrow can be a different day. Right. So it's practical things, but also key philosophical things in terms of how you observe yourself and your relationship with your body. And I think body neutrality just beautifully sums up how that can be helpful with the chronic illness recovery intersection.
Amazing. And also probably some just sticking to your own lane there as well, like accepting that this is you, this is your path and your experience. Because if you're comparing yourself to the person next to you who's whatever, on the day when you're having a bad day that they're not and they're flying through and maybe being super productive or whatever it is, that you're not having the same expectations on yourself. You're like respecting, like, this is me and my path and where I am and this is what I need and it's different to somebody else right now.
Completely. And it's radical acceptance. It's that like radical compassion. Like I'm at the moment going through this process at 37 of going through neurodivergence assessments. So I'm going through this whole new phase of finding self-compassion and recontextualizing my understanding of myself and some of the things that is supportive of, but also limitations that I have. And it's the same thing with my body. I am very, very hard on myself. I'm my worst critic. I'm an always recovering perfectionist. Having a chronic illness can bring with it a lot of chatter about, shame and not being able to keep up and not being able to do what your brain wants to do. Your body just can't execute it. But again, not pushing against that tension. And if I have to have a nap in the afternoon, I do. If I have to work from bed like I did until 9:30, 10 this morning, I do. And then when I have a client call at 10, I'm up 5 minutes beforehand, brush going through the hair, comfortable pants, t-shirt, maybe a bra. They can't see from here down. Who knows? And just trying to make the day as doable as opposed to pushing against it and burning myself out today so the rest of the week is a disaster. So yeah, it's that constant checking in and constant self-compassion, but certainly that radical acceptance of this is it. This is what you've been given. And so what do you do with what's on the board?
I love radical acceptance so much because it just implies you don't have to like it. Like you can hate the situation. It can be totally not what you choose for yourself. You can be livid. You can wish you had this, wish you had that. But at the end of the day, like you said, if you fight against it, that tension that you create, like living in that tension is horrendous. But actually, if you can accept it, like my psychologist spoke to me a lot about accepting things I didn't like. And then I was like, oh, I don't have to like this, but I can just accept it in favor of living my life how I'd like to live it, like rather than fight it because I think it should be a certain way, just say, okay, it is that, it's shit, I hate it, and I choose to live my life how I want to live it or how I'm able to live it,
I think is so key because like think about one of the fundamental promises of an eating disorder, which is there's a third option. Like I'm always telling clients like there isn't a third secret option to life. Like it's either you
Yeah.
go with the hard thing or you live in avoidance and watch yourself just go into limbo and lose how much time. Like that's it. There's not a third. I won't feel the
True.
discomfort. The hard thing won't happen. I won't have to risk scary things to get the things I want. Like that's the exchange in life. If you want the thing, you have to be prepared to put in the hope, and you also have to be prepared to put in the risk of what if this doesn't work out or what if it doesn't feel good. And an eating disorder is that, oh no, you don't have to do any of that because your body will be this and you'll come across like this and no one will ever criticize you and you'll never ever have a uncomfortable or terrible thing ever happen to you again. And it's like, well, you're really just sitting in a place where nothing terrible can happen to you because you're not actually living your life. So, exactly. You're just in a little cave being like, okay, well, I'm living here. Nothing's really happening to me, but nothing very good is happening either.
So true.
So true. And do you think, Mia, in the beginning, you were kind of forcing yourself to almost do those things, those compassionate things of taking the nap, of wearing the more comfortable clothes, but now it gets easier with time? Is it sometimes like acting in alignment with the way that you want to be compassionate with yourself, but ultimately being compassionate in the end?
Yeah, like a bit of fake it till you make it, I think, when you're
Yeah.
starting to get into those habits. And then I'm someone like some of what I'm exploring at the moment is ADHD, but also the combined diagnosis of ADHD. So somewhere I've, recently been assessed for autism and I fall somewhere on that spectrum. So I also forget to do these things. I forget that these are the things that help me. And we also know that with eating disorders, there's a neurodivergence intersection there as well. So some of it is learning with time and putting it into place, and that becoming a little bit more of a knee jerk, like something that you just do more automatically. Like I'm quite good at the comforting things. Like what would I do for a friend? That's just such an easy go-to for me because I think, as you know, with clients, like it's something we're saying to them all the time. Like if this was a friend of yours, what would you say? If this was a friend of yours, how would you take care of them today? So that's a very easy thing that my brain has kind of wired in there, which is, okay, this is the default. This is what you're feeling like today. But I do have to be intentional with other things. I'm not very good at saying no when it comes to the people who I really care about. I'm not very good with boundaries. In every other facet of my life, I'm excellent at them. But in terms of the people who I love, I'm not so good at saying no. And my energy is something which is not in great stores a lot of the time because I have all these ways that I can very easily get tired and burnt out, etc. It's the constant checking in with myself that is probably the thing that I work on always. But that's why I think the comparison to your relationship with other people is the key, where it's like, even when you stuff up on how you cope, that's okay too. Like if like I do burn out and then I'm like, oh, how did I get back here? If I then just like swim in that shame of I didn't take care of myself the way I should have, or I didn't cope the way that I knew would work or help, or I didn't catch that I was heading towards burnout, again, like it's just a protracted suffering, right? I think the question sometimes has to be not will you suffer? It's like how long do you want to suffer for? So some of it has become a little bit more automatic, and other things require the self-compassion of like, even if they never become automatic, they're there. And I think it's also where your loved ones are so important, sharing this stuff with them. Like my mom and my best friend are very good when I get into those headspaces where I'm just a bit overwhelmed and teary and I just don't even know what the source of my discomfort is. They will have remembered the things that I do that I've forgotten in that moment, and they'll put them back in front of me, which is why I think with the people who it's safest to do it with, sharing your journey, whether that's recovery or it's a chronic illness or it's an intersection of a few things, is so helpful because sometimes they can sort of step in where maybe you're a bit too overwhelmed to step in for yourself, or a coach or somebody on your team who has like a bit of a go-to checklist as far as here's your flotation devices, like you forgot where you put them.
I love that because you're always talking about that as being one of the recovery skills of being able to reach out to people. And I've been on one of your body neutrality courses as a coach, observing what you do. And it's incredible the transformation that people have just from picking up those tools and practicing
Mm.
them and the confidence they get, those small things. But I think also what you're saying is that nobody's ever a finished healed product. Like we're always constantly learning. But what you pick up in recovery is the ability to check in with yourself, come back to yourself, use the tools that you've acquired, and then you can apply those to so many other areas of your life anyway.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially that. I think if that isn't one of the top three lessons that you get out of recovery,
Yeah.
then it might be time to revisit, some of the key lessons that you might have missed, not that you didn't work through, but that you just might have missed their significance.
Yeah.
Because, I went through recovery and then I went through the worst 2 years of my life, like horrendous, just like wave after wave after wave hitting and just being like, oh, this is just what life is like now. Like, but just let's get ready. Like, when's the next thing coming? Get prepared. Hypervigilance is kicking in. And it's remembering that the things that you do in recovery, which are box tickers, meal plans, behavior cessation, and then stopping behaviors completely, like they're indicators of progress. It's not actually the heart of your progress, right? How you learn to help seek, especially when it's not your natural inclination. I'm not a natural help seeker, but as far as some of those things that I've learned in terms of how to cope with my chronic illness, in terms of how to cope with the human things I deal with, that's something I am good at as a skill, but not as a natural instinct. But my expectation isn't that it's going to become an instinct. It just isn't. It's not my wiring. But I am good at it as something I've practiced. But the same thing with life. Like, you have to apply all those key things: how you treat yourself, how you talk to yourself, what your inner talk is like, how you help seek, how you do it proactively, how you cope proactively. Like, these are all the things that, yes, they'll get you well, but they will also keep you well long term. And that's not just from things like eating disorders. There's a whole like fun bag of maladaptive things we could do. And we want to be as safe as possible from all of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Mia, maybe you could talk, even though you said you're not very good at boundaries. I've never heard anybody explain boundaries the way that you explained it to me. I remember you telling me about it when I was saying that somebody was struggling, one of my clients was struggling with boundaries, and you explained it in such a way I've never heard of before. And so, yeah, maybe you can talk to that a bit, even if it's not your natural inclination. Maybe that's why you're good at explaining it, because you had to work through it yourself to be able to establish it.
Yeah, I think the things that we like become most expert in are the things we're
Mm,
worst at, to be honest. Because if it was
yeah,
natural,
true,
you'd never have to observe yourself, right?
true.
I always remember that when I'm watching someone who I'm like, they have it all figured out. I'm like, they only sound like that because they have not done these things very well, probably. But I'm very good at boundaries when it comes to work, when it comes to like social media. I'm very good with boundaries. It's when people start to get to the point where, I would do anything for them. And so I definitely still practice boundaries in a big way. And especially in recovery, I think this approach is so important because boundaries are not a black and white thing, which is where I came up with the 3 Bs of boundaries. So the first B is the boundaries people know about. So, for instance, like with my best friend, I can't think of anything I've ever had to set a boundary with, but I would feel super comfortable setting a boundary with Jose because she would listen and she would honor it to the best of her ability, right?
Mhm.
She would still be human. She might forget that thing's painful for me to talk about or uncomfortable or not great for whatever healing process I'm in at the moment. A good example being, like, I just don't want to talk about bodies. I just don't want to talk about food, yours, mine, anyone's. Like, I would just love if we kept that out of our conversations as much as possible. And that would have been like when I was going through an active recovery process, right? Just as an example for people going through that process. And Jose would do her best, but being human, there's also a caveat within that boundary, which is people are also allowed to be human and they're allowed to forget. And we might have to brush up and remind them of the conversation we had before. So, in the safe category of people who we are fairly certain are going to honor those boundaries, that's where that first B comes from. Then the second B is the boundaries people don't know about, but you are still kind of expressing. Trying to come up with a nicer way to say this other than passive aggressively, but it is a little bit passive aggressive at times. So these are the boundaries of yours that you know about, but you know that you're not expressing them to somebody who is necessarily going to the best of their ability or with the best intentions, try to honor it, right? Family members of a distant variety usually sit in this category. It's very often an uncle. Most of the time over the last 10 years, it's uncles I hear about at the
Mm.
Christmas, get together or the, birthday or whatever, where Uncle What's His Face will sometimes make comments about his wife's body or about your body or about everybody's bodies or about what people should or shouldn't be eating or about how many fasts he's done this year because he's been doing juice cleanses or whatever, right? Now, you've got evidence that if you say something to Uncle What's His Face, he's not going to care. In fact, that might inflame him. That might actually make the conversation worse. It might distress you more because not only are you having to be exposed to something unhelpful, but also somebody is willfully dishonoring the fact that you've asked for them to think about, somebody else. So, this is when you give yourself permission to get yourself out of those situations when and how you need to. And it's all the way from fake phone call to having an ally at those things, whether it's a partner or it's a sibling who's like, if I just give you a look or a word, you get me out of there. And we just go and we get a breather and a refresher. I've even said to people, if you need to announce that you have food poisoning and you are about to have everything come out of both ends, I don't care. If that is going to get you out of that room and that is going to stop something awful from happening when you get home, or you're going to deteriorate mentally and you're just not going to be able to, get yourself back to a good solid place, get out of that room, right? So, or like just limiting people's access to you. Like, do you even go to that thing? Do you have evidence that that's not the room that you should be in at the moment? Not forever, but at the moment. Or maybe friends who we need a little bit of distance from because whether intentionally or otherwise, they're just not honoring that boundary. And it's becoming increasingly difficult for you to honor your recovery and also be around these people. But again, that's temporary. And then there's the boundaries between you and you, which is the one you always have access to. You're not always going to have access to boundary 1 and 2. Let's say you have a boss who does engage in, cleanses and talks all the time about how they're losing weight. And you can't say to that boss, don't talk about that, right? Or that's not helpful for me. And you can't walk out of the room every single time they're talking about it, right? So the last option is the option you always have and can always use, which is that boundary between your healthy self and your eating disorder self. If you're going to be exposed to this stuff, this unhelpful stuff, which could be outright disordered or borderline disordered, and it's going to trigger something in you that is going to be unhelpful and maladaptive, how are you going to use it? Are you going to let it in? Are you going to absorb it? Are you going to internalize it? Are you going to let that turn into a stream of chatter, which then turns into urges, which then turns into behaviors? Or are you going to interrupt and bring healthy self to the table and make sure that healthy self is putting up that boundary in terms of where that's allowed to go? So even if you have interactions which the first two don't protect you from, your healthy self is always there as long as you make the choice to bring it. I think sometimes people are waiting for their healthy self, and it's like, that's not how that works. You have to make yourself bring your healthy self to those interactions and, yeah, put up that final wall of defense.
Wow. Wow. It's so powerful, just the way that you explain that in such a there's so many layers to it. And you just spoke to so many different people's clients' experiences. And the fact that at the end of the day, you've always got that healthy self within you to be able to create that boundary no matter the situation. And how would that look, Mia? Would that look like more of like a dialogue, which I think we're going to talk about in the moment kind of thing? And that dialogue might be in the moment going on as opposed to maybe a written one because you kind of need to do it then. Is that how?
Yeah, and even like just doing a little note taking in your mind of like, I need to unpack this when I get home, or I need to pull out my notes app in the car and I need to start unpacking this before it just turns into eating disorder being totally dominant and not, making it harder for healthy self to get in the door.
Yes.
Or going to the bathroom, pulling out your phone and emailing your coach. Like I will sometimes, my response hours are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday Sydney time. But if my clients give me enough lead time and we know there's going to be an event coming up on like a Saturday that's particularly challenging, like Uncle What's His Face will be there, and we're pretty certain that something unhelpful might happen, I'll say, look, I'm going to be around. If I'm just going to be at home and I'm just going to be pottering and cleaning the house, then I know that you'll be at that thing between this and this. I will, check my email intermittently, and I'll certainly check it after I know the event is over. If you need to debrief or you need to unpack something or get something started, I'll be here, right? So I think just having those points of accountability and contact can be helpful as well. And that could be a loved one. That could be, somebody who you just bounce this stuff off as well. It doesn't have to be somebody on your team. But it depends on where in the dialoguing process you are. Like
Yeah.
very often for people, they'll report if they're far enough into the recovery process, they're like, oh, healthy self showed up immediately and was like, we're not going there. Like, this is rubbish. And I actually feel quite bad for that person that they look at the world through that lens, and I'm not doing that anymore. But for other people, if they're still in the practicing stage, they probably need to get home and like get it on the page so they can slow the process down a little bit.
So speaking about dialoguing, it's something I wanted to ask you about, Mia. So it's a coaching tool which you obviously use with clients. Do you want to just explain what dialoguing is actually for a second?
Totally. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I heard Carolyn all the way through the course saying, if there's one thing she could teach people, it would be dialoguing. And I could not agree more. And I think that goes beyond people with eating disorders. I think everyone would benefit from this skill because to me, it is essentially putting people in the driver's seat of their brain. You can't always pick your first thought, but this teaches you how to pick your second one. And if you continue to pick the second one that contradicts the first unhelpful one, you can actually over time change the first one, like that first eating disorder thought. So, dialoguing is essentially this conversation between your healthy self and your eating disorder self that's usually prompted by an eating disorder thought. And the best way to help people identify what is the difference between those two, do I even have a healthy self, is to reflect on an eating disorder thought you might have, or if you're someone who doesn't have an eating disorder, maybe it's a really critical thought you have about yourself. And to first ask yourself the question, if this was coming from a friend of mine, but I put a slightly different spin on this reframe, if it was a friend of yours who was in your exact boots, like they had your exact context, they had your exact upbringing, they had all your past experiences, they had your eating disorder history, they were at the stage in recovery you're in now, but they're still them, they're still this person you know and would speak to in a very different way to how you speak to yourself. What would you say back to them if they were saying something to you from their eating disorder self, right? For instance, something like, well, like what we just said. So Uncle What's His Face has said this thing, and that's what everybody thinks, and everyone must think that of me. And so what's the point of this whole recovery thing? If your friend said that to you, in no world would you go lean into that thinking. Give up on recovery. Definitely go with that opinion that's been shared with you by somebody who you probably wouldn't take any life advice from. That's another great guide. If you wouldn't take advice from them, don't take their opinion, right? So that then gets this conversation going where there's your healthy self. It showed up for somebody else. But then when we put it back to your eating disorder self, this is the key thing, is that we allow it to respond, right? We allow it to keep talking, which can feel really against the grain for people because very often they're taught, shut it up, shut it down, don't listen to it. We have so much to learn from an eating disorder self about our vulnerabilities, about the role eating disorder self has been trying to play, about how it's trying to protect us or regulate us, take care of us, prevent things from happening again that have happened before. It's trying to do all kinds of really well-intentioned things. It's just bad at it. Like with your kids, if they came up to you and they were like, I want to cook you breakfast, mum, and I want to be left alone in the kitchen, you'd be like, that is adorable and sweet. There is no way that's happening because you might hurt yourself and other people. Intention's great,
Yeah.
execution's bad.
Even if it does have a benefit, it does serve some sort of purpose. The cost that comes alongside it, the sacrifice, like the impact and impairments on your life, like as a net balance,
You've
it's
got
not doing a
cooked
great
breakfast,
job.
but you don't have a house anymore. It's burnt down. Like it's gone. Like beautiful. How lovely. What a lovely instinct. Execution sucks. So your eating disorder is that kid in the kitchen trying to do a good thing with no skill set to be able to do it. So we have to listen to it. It's also a part of us that needs to be nurtured and taken care of. It's the most vulnerable, scared part of us. Scared things sound angry, right? Because we would be angry too if something was trying to be taken away from us that we felt like was, keeping us around. So it's this very, very methodical back and forth between eating disorder self and healthy self, where you're kind of looking at the initial eating disorder thought as a claim. Like, here's this claim that your eating disorder is making. And now the job of the dialogue is to prove or disprove that claim, like you would in court, right? And the only things that are allowed in that dialogue are objective evidence, things that would hold up in court, and also just some of these mindset shifts that we do. Like, what would we say to somebody else just helps you expand out and not get stuck in the minutiae of that thinking. Or if it makes a claim, one of my favorite claims that comes up in dialogues is if you recover, you won't be healthy anymore. Like, you're going to become unhealthy. And like, I'm keeping you healthy and we can't become an unhealthy person. And when you look at the stats of eating disorders with 20% of, some sufferers losing their lives, the remaining 80% when they don't recover, having terrible implications on their mental and physical health. The reframe I use there with people is if you had to have surgery and you went to a surgeon where you found out they killed 1 in 5 of their patients and maimed the remaining 4 out of 5, would you go with them? And they're like, absolutely not. I'm like, but that's what you're doing with your eating disorder. It's in charge of your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your relationships, your friendships, like your social health in terms of your purpose and meaning long term, why you want to be here. It's in charge of everything. Like the stats are the same. So the fact that it says that it's keeping you healthy, but it's maintaining the highest mortality rate, and like how are we making that calculation? And you just see the light go on in people's eyes where they're like, "Oh my God, oh that's irrefutable." And then the most important thing is you make eating disorder respond to that. And what starts to happen is the claims start to go away and the feelings start to surface. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen to me. If I'm not here to take care of things, who are you going to be? Like what space are we going to take up in the world? If my body changes, are these things that have happened to me before, are they going to happen to me again? Am I going to belong? Am I going to be safe? And that's the stuff we need to deal with, is the feelings and the fear, but it's being cloaked in all these claims and all these facts. And I'm putting big bunny ears around these words, because it is ultimately what we get to is the fear and the shame and the sadness and the uncertainty. And we can deal with that. Like that is the stuff that needs to be taken care of and nurtured and reassured and validated. So yeah, that's why I just think that they're so powerful. And people will often be like, but Mia, there's a million new thoughts every day. So I'm chasing around after so many thoughts. I'm like, if you dig in a few layers into any dialogue, you're having the same conversation over and over again. I don't want to be unsafe. I don't want to not belong. I don't want bad things to happen to me. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be criticized. I don't want to be rejected. So ultimately, it doesn't matter where the dialogue's starting, movement, regularity, adequacy, body image, whatever, it all comes back to the same few fears. And that is why I fundamentally believe that people can fully recover, because we can rewire those few fears and thoughts and also help people to take the action, which their brain can pay attention to and go, okay, maybe this catastrophizing my eating disorder self is doing is incorrect. And if we give the brain the evidence to pay attention to, and we're also cognitively rewiring the fears and we're neutralizing those fears, then the brain isn't incentivized to send that first thought up anymore. So that's been my observation in terms of, if there's two core things we're doing with people at the center of everything, it's the goal setting and it's the dialoguing and doing those things in tandem. You cannot just think your way out of an eating disorder and you cannot just act your way out of an eating disorder. You have to align both, which is where I think coaching has just been such a game changer for people in an outpatient sense, because we're doing that. And we're doing it with people in their lives where they're getting the most important evidence that they can live their lives and they can recover. They're not just doing it in environments that take them out of their lives. So
Yeah.
long answer, but it's a skill which can be explained as well. But until you do it, people are like, that won't work for me. Like what? No, I'm the one that won't work with it. I'm like, I promise you it will. There's never been a dialogue where I'm like, oh my God, what do we do? I don't know what to say. Like eating disorders are not very original, right? Like everyone says the same thing at the end of the day, to be honest.
Mhm. I love that. I love how you just described that. And like the combination of the goal setting, which is action taking, I guess, like changing behaviors, actively changing behaviors, alongside dialoguing, which is cognitively reframing, changing your thinking and belief system around it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like I think of the process as like you set a goal, you see someone's eyes go like, I can't do that. And you're like, what's your eating disorder saying right now? And they tell you, and you're like, okay, let's do the dialogue. Let's dispel those beliefs. And then they go off and they do their goal while they've still got email backup support from me. If it's going wrong, email me, we'll troubleshoot it. We'll dialogue in real time, anything new it's saying. And then they do the thing, the terrible catastrophic thing doesn't happen. Then we come back together, we quarterback the week and go, okay, what worked, what didn't work? Let's leave what isn't working behind and take everything that is. But it's you've got to poke the bear with an eating disorder. You have to get it to tell you, why is that thing scary? What is going to happen? Dispel those beliefs, but then give yourself the evidence to say, the dialogue was right. My healthy self was right. Because that also then builds up the trust with your healthy self. Like you haven't been in touch with your healthy self for you for so long. It's also this process of trusting it and aligning with it. You watch clients do this thing where they go, oh, I feel like my eating disorder's like this and my healthy self's like this. And then over time they're like, oh no, it's a bit more like this. And then they're like, no, it's like, and then it's like, I don't hear it anymore.
Yeah, and then it's just
So
so natural. It's just then becomes your thought system. Like you said, it's then your first thought. It's not that I'm having to counter it with a second thought.
yeah, like you weren't born with eating disorder thoughts. So your brain repeated eating disorder thoughts into your dominant way of thinking. It just did it subconsciously. You didn't know that was happening, right? But all it was repetition of eating disorder thoughts. And then you did the eating disorder things. And then that became the wiring that you relied on. Now you're doing the same thing. You're just doing it intentionally, which is why it's hard work, which is why it's always harder work than the eating disorder thing, because that's an illness that just happened. But the mechanism is similar. Now you're doing the healing is really just doing the same thing on the way back out.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Just to pick on one thing you just said about when the catastrophic thing doesn't happen, I think sometimes it's terrifying because in a way it can happen sometimes. Like, say the dialogue is, if I eat unrestricted, I will gain weight. Or
Mhm.
if I eat unrestricted, I won't be weight suppressed. Like, if that's your catastrophic thing, like, yeah, that is going to happen. Like, no human body naturally weight suppresses on an unrestricted diet, So
Yeah.
how do you help people with that? Like the reframe of like, okay, the thing, you might challenge the thing and it doesn't happen, brilliant, crack on. But if you challenge the thing and it does happen, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
how do you speak through
But,
that?
well, so many things come true. Like, I'm
Mm.
going to be uncomfortable. That's true.
Mhm.
Right? If you do this thing this week, you're going to be so uncomfortable. That is absolutely true because that's recovering. Like if you're not uncomfortable, are we even doing the thing we need to be doing to make sure that you recover? Right? So absolutely. And in the case of, body changes. So I think very often as professionals, coaches, therapists, all of us, the instinct can be to like soothe that or lean away from that and be like, well, if that happens, we'll deal with it. And it's like, well, if you're not dealing with it now, how are you going to help them deal with it then? Like the fear they're experiencing now is like just going to show up then. So like, let's deal with it now. My instinct is to lean in, let them lean in, let them go there. So when eating disorder says stuff like, if you eat this way, your body's going to change. And my recommended response to that is always, and then what's going to happen? Get
Mm.
specific in all the key areas of your life that's going to impact. What is that going to look like? Your relationship with yourself, your relationship with other people, your career, your schooling, your whatever, right? Like social life. What is going to happen? How is that going to impact those things? Get them to get really specific. And then this can seem laborious, but again, it isn't because if you unpack each one, again, it all comes back to the same stuff, right? So if you do one, you're really unpacking most of them. So then you get them to, let's say, look at it's going to make me too uncomfortable. I'm going to be so uncomfortable. I'm not going to be able to, live my life. And this is actually one of my favorite ones. So I will say to them, okay, so let's say that happens, right? Like, let's say your body changes and things get so uncomfortable that you feel like you can't engage with your day-to-day life and you withdraw and you isolate. Then what's going to happen? You got to do you guys remember that awful movie, Dude, Where's My Car?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, this is going to be a very niche reference for just millennials listening to this.
Just our age, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Check your analytics and be like, well, that
Yeah.
will make us decide whether we leave this in. But it's that Ashton Kutcher movie, and it's awful. And they show up to the drive-through, and the woman at the drive-through keeps saying, and then, like as they're ordering, and they're like, no more, and then, like we're just what we ordered. We don't want any more, right? I kind of find myself doing that in these dialogues because I will say to them, okay, so then what will happen? You'll be so uncomfortable. You won't be able to live your life fully. Like, what will happen? Well, I will isolate and I won't want to talk to anybody. And my anxiety will be so high. I'm like, okay. And then what will happen? And they're like, and then I'll go back to eating disorder behaviors. And I'm like, okay. So what did the eating disorder just do? And they're like, I have no idea. I'm like, it just told on itself. We just asked it, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst outcome of what can happen in recovery if your body changes? And it says itself.
Mm.
Okay, you've already done that. You've already lived that. So you have nothing to lose. What if it doesn't end up like that? What if we actually have a lot of examples that for a lot of people, it doesn't end up like that? It's like sometimes, as you know, we will have uncomfortable conversations with clients who are like, well, you recovered into a socially acceptable body, Mia. So, like, how can you say confident? Because I'm not the only person who has recovered There are lots of examples out there of people from all different backgrounds, in all different body sizes, all different gender identities, all different abilities, who have been able to reach full recovery, right? And to say that it's not possible to be an X body and be recovered is to say those people don't exist, right? So letting them explore the worst case scenario of your body changing and it ending up with your eating disorder is like, okay. Very often if you ask me my worst case scenario in life, the worst thing that could happen to me, I'm going to come up with stuff that has never happened to me. Like things I can barely even bear to think about, right? Your eating disorder, when we ask it about the worst thing that's going to happen to you in recovery, it says itself. And I guarantee 99% of the time, that is where that dialogue ends up, is I will go back to my eating disorder. Okay, there's a million other things that could happen. And also, this is the other key thing with how treatment has let people down. We didn't help people do body image work for so long. We didn't help them, apply practical skills for getting to a more neutral place with their body. Stopping them from body monitoring, body checking, one of the most distressing behaviors in an eating disorder, where they don't even have a sense of what they look like, let alone what's going to happen to their body, right? And so those things could come true. Yeah, they could. I'm not a geneticist. I don't know what's going to happen to anybody's body. But the beliefs you have now, the associations you have now with what that means, what if that changes in the healing work that you're going to do, right? What if that changes with the evidence that you gather that you're not going to maybe have the experiences that you've had before, that maybe now you will have a different way of advocating for yourself or of who you surround yourself with. Because, of course, we have to accept the intersection of things like diet culture and fat phobia. Absolutely. I'm not denying that on a macro sense that that is a very real thing. And it can show up in the micro of people's lives as well. Having done this work now for like more than a decade, what your eating disorder tells you is going to happen in that regard is just so antithetical to what actually ends up showing up in people's lives. It so overestimates how much that is going to show up in somebody's life. And it underestimates your capacity to deal with it and your capacity to advocate for yourself and to say to someone like the 3Bs, I don't accept that kind of behavior. I don't accept that kind of treatment. And to, again, maybe associate it with it differently than the 12. Like for me, I was bullied horrendously in my childhood for my size, for my weight. I was 6 foot by the time I was 12. They had to give me crutches because I had growing pains for about 3 weeks because my legs grew so quickly. And I was in a larger body for much of my childhood and my teenage years. So I understand the just intrinsic fear of that happening to you again. But maybe it can be different this time because you are going to be different and you're going to heal more than just, can I eat this food and can I eat regularly? It's going to be all this fundamental holistic stuff that we're going to teach people that includes the embodiment practices and the body neutrality practices. I do work with people where we are dismantling diet culture and we are challenging some of these notions and even some of our own biases. Like the first people who are fat phobic to us in terms of our eating disorder is us, right? Like we're walking around with it all day. And this is the last thing I'll say about this, which is people fear ending up in those bodies because they fear judgment, shame, ridicule, and rejection, right? I say to people, like, what does it sound like to be in your head right now? If you had to classify like the voice that talks to you, and they're like, it's judgmental, it's shaming, it criticizes me. And I'm like, that is the biggest form of self-rejection, right? And it is constant rejection. You are trying to stay out of a bit of a sprinkle of judgment and rejection and ridicule by going diving in the ocean of it, right? And like submersing yourself until you can't breathe. You're suffocated by it. So again, it's like what we were talking about at the top of the chat. The idea that there's this magic third option that your eating disorder is providing, no, it's immersing you in the worst version of it. So what if the first bit of judgment and criticism and rejection you could get rid of was the one you listen to 24/7? Someone making an awful comment, you can walk away from that. You can't pull your brain out of your head and put it on pause, right? So there's so many things, and like always acknowledging my privilege in terms of speaking to this for other people. I can only say what I've observed, which is that nobody is exempt from being able to be free, obviously with certain caveats there in terms of accessibility and privilege and that kind of stuff. But I truly know from the demonstration of people in all kinds of bodies that body size does not have to be one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if, like you're saying, part of the tooling is getting that acceptance piece. Like it's not even saying you have to love this. If you can even kind of hate it, but accept it and minimize its importance in favor of, I want to go out and live my life now. And, the life benefits alongside it. Because that's the other thing I was thinking, everything you said about, and then what's going to happen, and then what? It's all on the side of body, food. It's all related to the eating disorder. Like if you turn your attention, like there's a whole other side of life. Like what about connection? What about meaning? What about purpose? What about laughing? What about making memories? What
Yeah.
about waking up in the morning and not thinking about food? Like there are so many benefits that can come alongside it, that even if some things come true around the discomfort, or this catastrophic thing did come true, if it's trumped by a ton of benefits that affords, it's like the reverse of an eating disorder. Like if it serves a benefit but at a huge sacrifice of life, what if you flipped it and like took away the benefit of the eating disorder but reclaimed the benefit of life, kind of thing?
Yeah, and it's the ultimate contradiction of like, you think about that, like you just beautifully said, you get this, you maybe end up in a body that your current self can't imagine being able to exist in. And I'm sorry, but regardless of what body you end up in, I think Meg, you and I have had this chat before. I'm reminiscing on, I think you and I have spoken about it. When you start recovery, you don't know what's going to happen to your body. Right. So, like, in terms of that fear, we're not geneticists. We don't know. I didn't know what my body was going to do when I went through recovery. I still had to challenge and dismantle all the things that were in front of me in terms of those fears. But also, this idea that you're being in this body, if it does give you access to all these wonderful things, then yeah, there's like maybe a little bit of a calculation you have to do right now in terms of what am I willing to kind of exchange here, right? You think about it, its core, why so many people are pursuing an eating disorder, it is, and it's not for everyone, but let's say that controlling the body and controlling body size is one of them. When you get to the heart of why people are doing that, it's because they want more connection, they want to be confident, they want to be self-accepting, they want to be able to pursue the things that are important to them and feel worthy of that. But when you watch people slide further and further and further into those behaviors which maintain that body, they have none of that. I know I had none of it. I was unemployed. I wasn't talking to any of my friends. I wasn't talking to my family. My mental health was in tatters. I didn't want to be here anymore. So, just on the face of it, just by calculation, let's say that it came true that I was going to be uncomfortable in my body forever, if I could get all of those fundamental things back, which make life worth living, that's a pretty sweet deal. And so I think that looking at, again, like when your eating disorder is pointing its finger at recovery, it's pointing three fingers back at itself, right? Okay, so maybe this will happen. Okay, but what's happening now? Like, what's this body actually giving you in terms of the promises it made? And I can guarantee you there's no one walking around going, this worked for me. This absolutely 100% worked for me. If they were true to themselves about looking at the metrics of something working, right? With the initial promises it made, how many did it actually keep?
Wow, that was just so powerful, Mia. There was so much in there that I think is going to resonate with people. And I think one of the really things that I took away from that is sometimes people get overwhelmed with how many rules they've got related to their eating disorder, how many foods that they've got to now challenge through the recovery process. But I think what you're saying is the fact that the eating disorder is so unoriginal and it always often boils down to the same few things. So it's not that you need to challenge every single ratio rule that you have or every single food fear that you have, because actually, as you start to challenge these things and rewire and heal the stuff that's actually happening underneath, the other things will almost automatically heal or be easier to overcome,
Yeah,
right?
they bring each other along. Like when we'll be going
Yeah,
through traffic lights and, every couple of months check in, like where's everything sitting? And suddenly you'll notice like these foods which we haven't done a lot of challenging of because they're similar to other foods that we've done a lot of challenging with. It's like, oh no, I eat that all the time now. And I'm like,
yeah,
we've barely even challenged it. And they're like, oh no, because I did that other food. So I think that when you look at it at the face of it at the start, it can all look really daunting.
mm,
Um, but when you get into it, I'm not saying that it's easier than it appears at the start, but your capacity is greater than you're currently giving yourself credit for in terms of how you're going to go about tackling it.
amazing. And Mia, are there any other tools that you use that you would often use with your clients, whether that be in relation to calorie counting or compensating and those sorts of things? Are there any top things? Because I know you're super practical with your coaching.
Totally. The calorie counting one is actually one that happened in my own recovery in terms of how I started breaking that cycle was smoothies. And you can do this also with, people cooking for you or like sauces that you, or maybe like a meal or something that you buy out that's like a pasta sauce or a curry sauce or something like that. Something that is just impossible looking at it to figure out like what even the ingredients all are, let alone the contents of the calories might be. But I did it with smoothies. So I would make a mess because I would have like the NutriBullet cup on the bench and then I would get the yogurt and I would like pour the yogurt in and turn away. And like the fruit was harder to do that with, but I'd like chuck stuff in there. And then the honey was the real one. So I would squeeze honey and not really know how much was in there because then I would like look away, put the little thing on top, blend it, and sometimes it was a disaster, like it was 90% honey, but it didn't matter. I was going to have it because what that did was that threw the day off, and if I did that enough days in the week, I knew it threw the week off. So there was no point trying to count everything else because this just put a huge canyon in my ability to track that data. And then I had to, like with everything, we'd poke the bear, then I'd have to unpack what it was that was bothering me or was uncomfortable about that, move through the discomfort, move through any urges, help seek, all of that good stuff. But there are other ways to do it. Like I said, somebody cooking for you, purchasing something takeaway or whatever, where you just truly don't know the calorie contents, doing that a couple of times a week. You do that enough, you're just not going to know. And obviously getting rid of anything where you can track, anything that's tracking incentivized, get rid of it. And for urges, I like to teach people dual distraction, which is when we're trying to move through an urge, it's not enough to just distract the mind because eating disordered behaviors have a physical component very often, especially like binging behaviors, purging, or the combination. Once they show up, they are really hard to move through, really, really hard to move through. It's not that they can't be done. You probably just have to try a few different things. And dual distraction is one of them. So it's making sure that you have something not too overwhelming to do with your hands. So something familiar, like I'm a puzzle person. I've got a puzzle going at the moment on my coffee table, or coloring in, or it might be crocheting, not a new skill, not something that's going to add overwhelm, something you know, whilst also maybe watching a TV show that is familiar, not a new TV show, not where you don't know if a character's going to die or not, or break up and make you sad and anxious out of nowhere. And having the mind occupied in a calm way and the body occupied in a calm way. But also reaching out to someone and saying, I'm going to do this for 20 minutes. I'm going to set a timer. And then Mia, I'm going to check back in at the end of those 20 minutes. And if I need to set the timer again, I'm going to go again. And then I'll check back in. So there's no magic bullet for anything with an eating disorder. It's usually a combination of things and it's finding your combination as well. Like for me, for instance, I can't meditate to save my life. I listen to Holly talk about these 3-day silent meditations and I'm like, why do you torture yourself? And she's like, it's not torture, it's wonderful. And I'm like, I'm never coming. I'm just never doing it. That is, I couldn't do it. I just know I couldn't do it. It would make me distressed. So you've got to find the thing for you, right? This is the importance of treating people individually and finding their toolkit, and letting them experiment. Recovery is, in essence, an experiment. It's not a test you need to pass and do perfectly.
Oh, love that.
On dialoguing, so you said about like there's the action part and there's the cognitive part, like the dialoguing part, and also that people when they get to the dialoguing say that they get another thought and then another thought and then another thought. Do you ever get in a situation where you feel like people are then just having an argument with themselves in their head, or it almost paralyzes them to the spot and they can't almost solve the dialogue, like they can't end on a healthy self thought, or the eating disorder thoughts just feel so believable? Like, are there situations where you say to people, don't use a dialogue now, use it away from this situation, or like if it's not working for you, just act anyway? Like how would you advise someone when they're in that kind of situation?
Great question, because like on that sort of urge surfing sort of point that I was just making about what works there. Like for instance, if somebody has a binge purge urge, a dialogue is just fundamentally really not going to help at that time, right? Because you're so active. I mean, I remember what that feeling was like. It's at that point, that's like trying to push back an army of 100 and it's just you. Not to say that things like the things I just listed wouldn't help, But a dialogue in that situation isn't necessarily going to help because that really requires enough cognitive awareness to be able to sit and like pass out what's happening like in your like thought wise, right? At that point, you're in this pretty high adrenaline body feeling of discomfort. But that's not to say that other things won't work. Like I said, help seeking, dual distraction, and the other thing I'd mention for something like binge purge urges, get out of that environment. Go somewhere else, especially if it's access point, get out of there. Like I'm so sorry to the planet, but I used to drive so much when I would get those urges because I was in the car. It wasn't ease of access, right? I would drive as far away from the house as I could. And then I would be listening to a podcast or music, or I'd call somebody and talk to them while I was in the car. So getting out of the environment and removing the access point is really important until that urge, you're confident it's moved on. In terms of dialoguing, that's an example where I wouldn't say use it in that moment, but still use it afterwards. They're what I call delayed dialogues. So let's say that you don't use the behavior. You still have a lot to learn about what happened, right? What were the contributors of how you got to that point of distress that day? What were the things that you were telling yourself? What happened? Was your boss an asshole to you? Like, did you not get enough sleep the night before? Like, what are the things that pushed you into the point of dysregulation where you suddenly were like hit with this urge? Let's say you did use the behavior, right? Again, not the end of the world, depending on how you choose to use it. What a lot of people do is I'll get an email being like, well, Mia, I stuffed up and I used behavior, and so that's ruined. And I'm like, okay, so let's do a dialogue. And they're like, what's the point? I screwed up. I'm just going to bin it. And it's like, but what do you do when it happens again? Eating disorders are nothing if not repetitive and cyclical. So this feeling, this exact feeling, an exact day like this could happen again. A stressful day at work, a night of no sleep, people pulling you in 100 different directions to the point where you're so dysregulated that this thing hits you. What do you know now that you are going to know for next time that you didn't know as this happened, right? So delayed dialogues help you get to the heart of not necessarily how you can get on top of this one, but certainly more awareness of what's going to happen next time. Because the problem with eating disorders is that more entrenched they become, the more they take our awareness. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. You cannot acknowledge what you're not aware of. And sometimes these behaviors are about the awareness and acknowledgement building phase. You will stuff up, you will use behaviors, not in the long term. And the thing that's really going to change that outcome over time is like, what did you do when that stuff up happened? What is going to be different next time? Like I say, go back in time travel. You wake up and it's 24 hours earlier. What would you do differently this time? Let's step it out. When would you reach out to me? What would you do in terms of what you did when you got home? Would you make sure that maybe you didn't give yourself as much access to like for me, I would have avoided maybe going past Woolworths and the supermarket because that I would have felt hijacked and I would have, been dragged in there by those binge urges. What are some things that we could put in place next time that are just purely practical? It's got nothing to do with the thoughts changing. Just what could you do to prove to yourself that that outcome is not inevitable? Because binging, purging, those kinds of behaviors can just feel inevitable. They're just going to happen. I have to get rid of the urge. They are not inevitable. If you get over an urge, that is an urge you packed up and you put away. It's not loitering around the next corner waiting to jump out at you. In terms of people getting lost in it, this is where doing it with someone like a coach is so important because it's one of my favorite things to do is to be like, is that your healthy self? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, would you say that to somebody else? Like, no. I'm like, then it's not your healthy self. So that's where they'll get confused. They'll hear things from their eating disorder self, like when it's going on about health or it's going on about keeping you safe and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but is that safety for someone else? Oh no, I would not think I was keeping someone safe if I was doing that for them. It actually sounds quite judgmental and quite cruel. And I'm like, well, there you go. Then it's not your healthy self. So there's just, and then they pick it up, right? Like you do it enough times with them and then they can quickly intervene and you can see that in the emails they're sending or how they're doing it in session. But no, there is no dialogue I've ever done with anyone where I've been like, I literally don't know what for them to get them to say back because again this terminal uniqueness we all have, this unicorn thing we all have where people are like, oh no, Mia, no, you see, I'm going to have the dialogue that is just going to keep going forever and we're just never going to get to the end of it. I'm like, okay, well, let's test that theory.
Wow.
And they'll
Okay.
be like, it's getting too long. We can move on, Mia. We can move on. I'm like, no, I've got an extra 10 minutes at the end of your session. If you've got the extra 10, we're going to keep going. So yeah, the whole sense of, you know, it's nice to be wrong sometimes, right? And I think in recovery, it's really nice to be wrong that like we're the one who's not going to get there or this isn't going to work for us. And so yeah, I think dialoguing is just about timing. It's just
Yeah.
about where you put it into the
Uh-huh.
process and when.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so if you're like overwhelmed, paralyzed on the spot, even like when people walk into the kitchen and have to make a food choice, something like that, in that situation, I guess it's like using it in advance, using it after, because sometimes in the moment, I feel like you just have to act, like you won't necessarily
Yes.
make sense of it. You won't feel ready. It won't feel right. Like dialoguing isn't about solving it, is it? It's not about like, I now know completely this is 100% what I want to do, or this feels completely right. It's like,
No,
helps and it
no,
kind
no.
of reframes, but the action still has to happen.
Usually the emotions that are sitting at the end of a dialogue are sadness,
Mm.
fear, fear of the unknown, grief. Like it doesn't, the point of getting to the end of the dialogue isn't that your eating disorder is going to go, I am so stoked to do this. Like I can't wait to do this goal this week.
Yeah.
It's that you now have the choice of, am I going to make decisions for myself and my well-being based on what I now acknowledge as facts and evidence or on feeling? And when I look at the times when I've gone with my eating disorders feelings, do I have evidence that I just keep ending up in the same revolving door of misery? Okay. Well, then for this period of time, I have to try something different. And I'll say something that some people have said who don't have never had eating disorders, interestingly enough, will never say, right? And they say that I shouldn't say it, but it's the truth. You can try this recovery thing because the truth is, at any point, you can go back. That's just the truth. And I have a really clear policy in what I do as a coach. If you leave, if you just don't show up to session and I never hear from you again, you will never get a follow-up email from me ever. Ever. 90% of those people come back because the core part of the work I do is you have full agency, you have full autonomy, you have full permission to do whatever you want to do. If you want to get off the train halfway to recovery, full recovery town, and you want to live there forever, you are so, so welcome to do that. I just want you to know that the option's on the map, but you get to decide at any point what you want to do. It's the same principle here, right? Which is that you this ultimately, if you want to recover, one of the most integral parts of that is that this is totally your process, right? It's your life, it's your process. And if you're going to engage in it, then you have this. I'm here to help you do it, but I'm not going to judge or shame or pressure or guilt you into doing anything you're not currently able to do or don't feel is currently possible for you. But the door is always open. And then maybe that time does intersect again. And it's kind of like my approach with when people get tired, I don't just keep pushing them. I put them into maintenance and management. Let's maintain and manage what you've been able to do so far. We're not going to put anything new on the goal list. We're not going to put anything new, you know, metaphorically speaking, on your plate. We're going to keep you in a place where you can take a breath and you can reflect on all your amazing work and where you've been able to get to. But you need a break. Like you need to just sit in this moment and have a breather and look at the map and see how far you've come and how far you have to go and, you know, regather your energy. But that all comes back to that core tenet of like we're treating individuals. It's not, well, it's week 12. So like, why aren't you here? And like, you've been doing this for X long. So why aren't you recovered? Like, it's also what does that person want out of this process, right? So yeah, always person first, process second.
Yeah, that's what I love about coaching is there's no agenda. It's completely defined by the person. Like we'll explore with you where do you want to go in your life and help you to get there. And if you don't want to make changes, like there's other treatment that supports people in that situation, but coaching is not for that. Coaching is for you do want to make changes and you come to us for support with them, you know.
Yeah. And you have capacity. Like even if somebody's got 1% ability to make change and I can see that they can make change, and it doesn't matter by what increment. If they can move forward, I'm down for the ride. Like especially people who might have been in this for a long period of time, right? Like decades of wiring, being dominant eating disorder self. That process is not going to be rapid, right? But if I can see that that person can make change, that's
Mm.
more about readiness. It's not a judgment of, well, you don't want it enough, or like you're not working hard enough, or, you're just not. No, no, that's readiness. Is the resource appropriate for them versus if we just have this concept of like, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And we've got this gold standard way of doing this. And if you can't do that, there's something wrong with you. Is like, well, that's a pretty ego heavy view from
Yeah,
the
yeah,
professional world of
yeah,
like,
yeah,
we've come
yeah.
up with the answer. It's like for something as complex as eating disorders,
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Like,
And for someone's life, who am I to decide what you want from your life, kind of thing? And equally for that person, if they want to overhaul everything and make full changes, great, fully on board for it. Let's go. Like anything's possible within where you want to get to. And like we can help you explore that, but you define it, you set the goals, and then we'll help you to get there, kind of thing.
absolutely. And I think when we take those strict parameters off, what people are capable of just expands because, again, it's kind of like going back to the philosophy I try to take with my chronic illness, which is like if I take the expectations away and then the judgment and the shaming goes away, my ability to care for myself only expands because I'm not also then having to battle through a wall and layer of shame before I get to the taking care of myself, right? But yeah, I think that as you said, like coaching is that game changer for people where it's we're so in the weeds with people. It's not just, and obviously dietitians are integral, psychologists are integral, but in terms of that in real time troubleshooting, it's not just getting to the end of the week and being like, I tried to do the meal plan and I couldn't do 30% of it. It's I'm having trouble with this right here, right now. Okay, let's get on top of that before that 30% deteriorates. Like this can just be about breakfast being tricky this week. It doesn't have to be every breakfast.
That's amazing. Absolutely. So powerful, Mia, honestly. Mia, tell everybody where they can find you because you are very present on social platforms.
There's a few different spots. So you can come and find us at beyondbodycoach.com. We do currently have a wait list. It's not terribly long, but wait times can be a bit lengthy depending on where you are. You can find me at What Mia Did Next on Instagram and on TikTok. And Hol and I have the Beyond Body podcast, which you can get in video form on YouTube and Spotify and audio on Apple Podcasts. And that is fortnightly when we get around to it.
Mia, do you want to as well tell people? I think you've got a retreat coming up, right? That you're.
No, so retreat just gone, which we did in late August, early September, which was phenomenal in Bali. It was our first one in Bali with 10 people. It was incredible. And Hol and I are sort of in the midst of putting our heads together to figure out what 2026 is going to look like because it is
Cool.
rolling around much faster than I
Crazy.
think anyone ever anticipates by the time we hit October.
Literally. Okay, keep an eye on that because your retreats look incredible and online courses, everything. It's brilliant. So helpful to people.
There's plenty coming next year. So if you want to see what's coming, definitely come and give us a follow. There'll be all the info there as it comes out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mia.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
yeah, for the podcast, for everything you put out as well. Even during my own recovery, like you were such a staple part of my week, like watching your YouTube videos, following you on Instagram, like, and I know from so many people as well, I always hear your name that your
Yeah, me
content,
too.
it's so helpful and inclusive and not triggering. You're certified as a coach, it's informed. It's just a super, super helpful resource.
Oh, thank you, ladies. This has been unreal. And like I said, like what a full journey we've had over so many years and like life experiences. And the fact that we've all come through this and then, we're all called to do something so similar with it, which is just beautiful. And I love your podcast. Love it. Again, same back the other way in terms of like when people are like, but Mia, I need like safe, trigger-free resources. And I'm like, here's the list. Rewired firmly right there up at the top in the podcast list.
Thank you, Mia.
Love it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you,
Bye.
ladies. That was fabulous. I hope it's helpful.